Charlotte, and welcome to our Patient Insight series.
Hi there.
Hiya. It's great that you've come along to share your experiences with us today. So the point of this Patient Insight series is tube feeding,
Mhm.
which we know is a key part of the management of many of our inherited metabolic disorders. So to start with, could you just tell me a little bit about Lucas and his condition, please?
So my son Lucas has a urea cycle disorder. He was diagnosed with it at about 3 or 4 days old. He went into metabolic crisis and had to be transferred to a children's hospital and was started on hemofiltration. He has citrullinemia, which is one of the urea cycle disorders. And yeah, so day-to-day kind of management of his condition, he is on a low protein diet and he has medication 3 times a day. If he's unwell, then he's got an emergency regime that we follow, which is to start. It's called SOS 10. Or SOS 20 now. It's a carbohydrate liquid that we give him every 2 hours to kind of stop him from going into metabolic crisis. And that's if he's unwell, if he's vomiting, anything like that.
Wonderful. So there was no decision that was made when it came to Lucas needing to be fed by tube. What
Mhm.
what was your feelings about that at the time, and as part of his management going forwards?
Mhm. So, when Lucas was kind of first diagnosed, he was in quite a bad way, and they were very honest with us and said that they weren't sure if he would make it at all. So by the time that we kind of pared everything back, all of the life support, all of the IVs came out, the fact that he had an NG tube, for us at that point was like, well, that's fine, we can manage that. Um, because it had kind of been, it hadn't, that wasn't the worst thing that we'd had, basically. So the fact that he had the NG tube was kind of fine at the beginning. When we got home, it kind of hit home how kind of difficult it was going to be kind of managing his condition, especially with the NG tube. NG tubes are quite tricky to keep in because baby fingers kind of want to explore their face and all that kind of thing, so just constantly pulling it out through this bit here, constantly pulling it out, and then obviously having to put it back in again, so that was a bit tricky. But yeah, so originally it was okay, but then obviously as it kind of sinks in and you realize, hang on a minute, this isn't something that's just temporary, this is really long term, that's when it started to become a bit more difficult for us to kind of accept and kind of come to terms with.
Great, okay. And can you tell me a little bit about the transition from the NG tube to the PEG? Because I know you
Yeah.
changed over.
Yeah, so Lucas had an NG tube for 11 months, and then he had a PEG fitted. For the first little while, for the first few months of his life, our aim was to try and wean him off the tube entirely. And then when it was quite clear that that wasn't going to happen, we thought, okay, we're going to wait till he's 6 months old and he started to eat solid foods, because it might be that he takes really well to solid foods, and then we can just move him entirely over, and then he won't need any milk. But again, that didn't particularly go to plan as well. So I think because our focus at the time was trying to wean him off of the tube, we kind of left it longer than I think we maybe would have if we'd known it was going to be long term. So by the time that we got the PEG, or he got the PEG fitted, we were very much very much looking forward to having the PEG, to getting rid of the NG tube from his. It become quite tricky to keep placing it. Did not enjoy having it put in, obviously. So our kind of main thing was, we'd accepted that he was going to have a tube long term now, and we just wanted something that was going to be more comfortable for him. So it was something that we kind of looked forward to be honest, that he was going to get rid of the NG tube and the PEG was going to be a more long term and a more comfortable solution for him.
Wonderful. So it was a really positive move for you then.
Yeah, from the NG tube to the PEG, very positive move. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. And did you receive any support and training in terms of using the PEG?
Yep. So the when we were because of his condition, he has all of his any kind of procedures or operations done at the Evelina in London. So we had the gastro nurse at the Evelina show us what to do, how to do it, kind of in terms of cleaning it and looking after it and feeding through it as well. And then when we got home, we have community nurses that come out to see us. And they came out to if I had any concerns, if it's healing, they would come out and see us at home, kind of check it, make sure it was okay. They came around the first time that I did. So with a peg, you need to rotate and advance it. Basically, it's like twisting an earring round to stop it getting stuck. So you have to twist it round and just push it in to kind of make sure that it doesn't get stuck. So the community nurse came around the first time I did that, just to make sure I was comfortable doing it and to make sure I was doing it correctly and that kind of thing. So yeah, we had a lot of support with that.
Fantastic. So what were the pros and cons of the peg feeding?
So pros were definitely management of his condition. It's quite easy to get his meds in him because he doesn't spit or dribble them out. We can space them out really well across the day because I can give them to him when he's asleep as well, which means that I haven't got to try and fit them all in kind of when he's awake. I can space them out a lot. I mentioned earlier he has an emergency regime for if he's unwell, and with the peg, with the NG tube, you can't do a continuous feed because there's always a risk that they'll pull it out, and it can end up lodged somewhere that it shouldn't be. Obviously, with the peg, it's permanently there, so you can have it running overnight on a continuous feed. So if he's ever unwell and we have him on his emergency regime, then it's really easy to kind of put it on an overnight feed. So yeah, that's a definite bonus. And also as well, I mentioned about his low protein diet. He has a very low protein diet, but then he still has a specific target that he has to meet every day. And in Lucas's case, he eats food, but he doesn't eat a particularly large amount. And sometimes, like all toddlers, I suppose, he just doesn't want to finish his dinner. And there's no more pressure anymore. There's no pressure to kind of make sure that he finishes that food. I can top up whatever he needs through his peg, and it means that I can kind of keep him safe, get everything that he needs into him, and yeah, do it without kind of causing him any upset either, because I'm not trying to force him to eat food or drink milk when he's just not interested in it. The cons, I would say, tubes come with a lot of washing up. That's kind of the side of it that no one talks about, is the amount of syringes and bottles and everything else that you're still washing and sterilising, even at this point. But really, I wouldn't really say there were that many cons about it. I mean, I know that some people have issues with like infections and things in the site, but we have, like, Lucas hasn't really suffered with anything like that. He had a few little granulomas, which is just like a bit of like excess tissue kind of growth, but put a bit of ointment on it and it went away really quickly. So yeah, we've been quite lucky in those regards.
Wonderful. And you've transferred since from the peg feed into the button.
Yep.
How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, it's fine actually. The only difference really is that the button, you have an extension that you attach to the button that's in their tummy, whereas the peg has always got the tubing attached. So in that sense, it's a lot more neater because there's no kind of tubing hanging down or that gets in the way. You can unattach it and then they're kind of free to go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've had a couple of times where it's got caught and it's pulled out. But with a peg, they need to be put in under general anaesthetic, and they shouldn't really pull out. They're kind of very, very difficult to pull out. Whereas buttons are a bit easier to pull out. They shouldn't really come out, but they do sometimes. But you can just put them back in at home. So it's a lot less stress because I mean I got it caught about 2 days ago, trying to put him into his bouncer when he was having his feed. And it just pulled out. He didn't even flinch. I didn't even realise it had happened until I saw it on the floor. But I just got a new button, put it back in, inflated it, and good to go. So that's a real a pro of having the button as opposed to the peg.
Yeah, easier to manage at home.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Do you have any take-home messages for any other parents who might be in a position where they're contemplating tube feeding or are having those discussions with the specialists at the moment, and obviously concerns? Have you got anything that you'd like to kind of pass on to them?
Yeah, I think my main thing is it's not as scary as it kind of is, as it might seem. I think because it's not a typical way to feed, it's kind of seen as this, really scary thing to do. But really, it's just another way of feeding. It's kind of, you can put the same stuff in, it just kind of goes straight into their tummy rather than in their mouth. It takes a lot of pressure off, a lot of pressure. A lot of metabolic conditions are, diet. It all kind of relies around the diet. So they have to meet certain targets. They have to have a certain calorie target, a certain protein target, a certain, all of these different targets that they have to meet. And having a feeding tube just takes all of the pressure off your child, and you don't have to feel like you're forcing. And I feel like you're just spending the entire day just focusing on feeding and just focusing on meeting that target. You can just kind of really take a step back and just enjoy a bit more time with them, because you know that you can get it in them another way. If it comes to it, you can put a feed on overnight, so that it kind of frees up a lot more time in the day. So you could, you can have a feed going overnight so that they can get everything that they need throughout the day. I can feed him in the car, which is a pro as well. If we're on a long journey or anything like that, we used to have to, stop off to make sure that we've, fitted in certain things at certain times. Whereas now I can plug him into his pump and feed him on the go, which is really helpful. Medication, we've never had any issues with him kind of spitting up or kind of not taking his medication, because it just goes straight into his tummy. So we've never had any of those issues. So I think when it comes to kind of managing a kind of serious medical condition, tubes can be really helpful and really beneficial.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Charlotte, and thank you for giving up your time today to share your experiences and your knowledge as well of tube feeding with the various different types that there are. Thank you so much. I know you've got Lucas there, so we'll let you get back to dealing with that and looking after him. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.